Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Fabric Coffee session at Microsoft Fabric Cafe. It is Mirdad Abdullahi, the community lead of this amazing community at Microsoft Learn. So, first of all, just let's see what we have in the chat. Just say hello from wherever you are joining. And with that said, let me just share my presentation, like always, to see what we have for today for you guys. So today, the 17th session of Fabric Coffee. Amazing. And thanks for all of your positive energy that you're sending to us. That is really supercharged for us to just move forward stronger. And November 13th, 8 a.m. Pacific time, it is Microsoft Learn community. So I know we are part of this great community, and you can have actually access to the richest place for the lots of learning stuffs and also documentations in Microsoft Learn. And in the community, of course, you can connect to the other experts and your peers, ask your questions or answer the questions. Again, you're gonna just share your experience and also just help each other to grow together. So there are some learning rooms based on your interests. You can just choose from them, and it is in the different technologies or different purposes, like the career path or passing the certifications. There are the learning rooms there, and that you can just again connect with your learn experts or the peers. Here is the short link for ak.ms/learning rooms that you can choose a learning room based on your interest, especially for Microsoft Fabric Cafe, which we are concentrating on Microsoft Fabric. We are providing, learning and actually support to Fabric users in all levels. So it is a forum for everyone to learn, share, and grow skills together. Below, as always, is our, social media, information. And on our YouTube channel, we keep all of our recorded sessions and upcoming sessions. Feel free to subscribe to that and be actually more aware of the upcoming sessions, or if you want to rewatch the past sessions. In the LinkedIn page, we do our announcements and all of the updates from Microsoft Learn, Microsoft Fabric, or even the community. The the QR code is going to land you in that LinkedIn page, and feel free to join our learning room. Join Fabric Cafe in this tiny URL. There's a code of conduct in our community, and when you join the session, please be advised that actually we have these kind of stuffs in our community. Let's keep it positive. Thank you in advance. And about Microsoft Learn Challenge that was introduced in Ignite, it is going to be a good opportunity to have a free voucher for exam DP600. By just completing the courses in this in this challenge. So it is going to be still there until January 10th, 2025. This is a good opportunity. You're gonna just complete some modules there. If you don't know how to do that, you can reach me out, but it is very straightforward. There is a short link here as well, MS Ignite Challenge. And yeah, just let us know if you have completed that and you've got the free voucher. So in November, we had amazing sessions with amazing speakers. Feel free to watch them on YouTube channel. And for December, just let's wrap up the 2024 with other three sessions. The registration links are already shared in our LinkedIn page. You can just register there. We are changing our platform for going live, but it is the registration links are available on Meetup. And for today, we have two amazing speakers, Ginger Grant and Warwick Rudd. They're going to talk about just developing with Spark for Microsoft Fabric with Copilot, which is fantastic. So let me add Warwick and Ginger to the stage. Hello and welcome to Microsoft Fabric Cafe.
Thank you so much for having us.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from.
Awesome. Cool. I don't want to, waste more time. Many people hate me, every week, every single week. I'm just saying just repeated the stuffs. But for every single session, I have to go through those slides. Sorry, but so yeah. With that said, I'm going to just hand it over to you, guys. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat where it is relevant. I can maybe interrupt Warwick and Ginger if I feel it is a time. Otherwise, we can just move them to the end of the session. But Warwick and Ginger, I just forgot about ask you guys. Have you any riddles for our attendees today?
When is a door? I have one actually. When is a door? When is a door not like a door?
Okay.
Do you know this one? When
yeah,
it is a jar.
Maybe you can answer in the comments, right? Cool. So we have hi Ginger Grant and Warwick Rudd from Wigneshwar. And yeah, awesome. Cool. Warwick, you're gonna start it? Right. You should share your screen firstly, right?
Correct. There we go. All
awesome.
right.
I will be in the backstage. Please let me know when you want to just change your screen to Ginger's, and then I can just assist with that. So, guys, enjoy the session, and we'll be back there. And over to you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you're joining us from for Fabric Cafe. In today's session, we're going to be developing with Spark for Microsoft Fabric with Copilot. Now, to kick things off, I'll let my co-host, Ginger, introduce herself.
Thank you very much, Warwick. Hello. Welcome from the United States, where I happen to be. And I am a Microsoft Data Platform MVP and a Microsoft Certified Trainer. And I also teach a couple classes on Fabric in LinkedIn. So if you happen to have access to that, I highly recommend checking them out. I've put my contact information up there. Honestly, the place you can reach me after this, where I lurk most often, is, of course, XAAK Twitter. And I put my handle up there. Warwick, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ginger. Just like Ginger, I'm a data platform MVP. And the most important parts about this slide deck are contact details. Okay, like Ginger said, feel free to reach out to either of us to ask us any questions specific around this session or anything that you want to know about in the data platform. So what are we going to be talking about? So the agenda for this session is that we're going to have a look at Apache Spark. So we'll take you on a little bit of a journey with that. If you haven't already played with Apache Spark, then we'll start to get the ball rolling. We'll introduce you to Copilot. Now, as was mentioned, if you do have any questions, make sure that you do put them into the chat window. Try and make this as interactive as possible. Ginger did kick things off with a riddle at the start, but with that, let's get into today's session.
All right, just talking about Apache Spark, I know it's maybe something that a lot of you may not be that familiar with, but it's an open source framework. So it's not anything that Microsoft created or is unique to this platform. It's an open source framework and it supports multiple languages, including R, SQL, and of course, what we're going to be talking about, PySpark, Python. The thing about Spark, it was originally developed to help solve a Netflix contest in 2009. They were looking to have people try to come up with a better algorithm for picking movies for people. And this group of students from Berkeley came up with a solution, and they didn't even come in 10th place. So they were pretty far back in the contest. But what they did do is they developed a method for loading a lot of data into memory and then processing it very, very quickly. And the rest of us became the winners because that became open source. And that solution, the ability to spread compute to multiple nodes and to very efficiently use memory, is something that we're all able to take advantage of today. And that allows us to process really iterative processes like machine learning or querying data really well because it will scale to how much compute that you have and then scale back down and provide the answer using all of those nodes. So it's a massive multiprocessor. And it allows us to process data very efficiently, especially when you're in the cloud, where we can, of course, scale resources as we want to.
Okay, so for Spark, the four major components that we need to be aware of, we can see those on the screen. Okay, now what it does is that Apache Spark across the bottom, okay, so that's the core functionality. And this provides us the basic I/O distributed task dispatching and scheduling. And this is known as resilient distributed data sets, or you may have heard of it as RDD. So while we are talking about it, if you do hear us say RDD, then that is coming back to that resilient distributed data sets. Okay. Now, each of those data sets is divided into logical. There we go. Don't know why that clicked. My mouse decided to have a mind of its own. So each data set is divided into logical partitions. Okay, and that means that what we're wanting to process or compute is able to be done on different nodes in our Spark cluster. Now, starting with Spark 3.0, it supported ANSI SQL commands. Now, for those of us who are working in the data platform space, specifically if you're used to working with SQL Server, you'd be writing T-SQL, okay? Now, that's slightly different from ANSI SQL, so we do need to be cognizant of that. The Spark streaming provides us for the processing to occur as data is streamed. Like Ginger just mentioned, we're able to pick that up and really utilize things in the cloud. For our MLib or our machine learning library, this is where there's a number of algorithms which are available for us to use as part of what we're developing. And then GraphX, this is the ability to analyze data using a collection of nodes and relationships. So nodes being individuals. So Ginger and I are both individuals. Our relationship, the first time we met, well, actually, no, it was before we were both in the program, but being MVPs is a relationship on joining us together in what we're talking about here.
So, talking about Spark supported languages here, Warwick, I noticed there's a couple of questions in chat that are talking about the different languages. So I want to kind of talk about what's been the questions in chat as part of this slide. So Spark supports R, Scala, which is what that red scrolly thing is, and and Python as well as Java. Now, Spark API calls, I went to a presentation some years back and they mentioned that like 90% of them are run in Spark SQL. As far as how the languages work, all the languages are designed to work optimally with the Spark cluster. So in answer to the question about PySpark versus Scala, it doesn't really matter from a performance perspective inside of Microsoft's implementation of Spark to use that. I know that I believe in Databricks there may be a slight advantage, but that's not open source code. It is proprietary, so I think they may have a slight advantage. But there really is no advantage for using big data processing for PySpark over Java. There's either one you'll get similar results for. The difference is that you'll find more examples if you're looking for how to do it, if you're looking to do that inside of Spark. And since Apache Spark is designed as a machine, as a process that loads everything into memory, I don't know about saving memory space, but it uses it. And answer the question, is Spark a good framework for saving memory space? It uses memory space. It is entirely loads everything into memory and then efficiently allocates resources towards it. So it doesn't save it, it uses it. And you can use any of those languages that you want inside of notebooks. Generally speaking, people use Python because it has become a convention, as it is a very widely used language and used not only for data processing, but you can use it for creating web pages if you wish to as well. You can use Java. It's less useful. There's not as many data specific libraries created for it as there are for Scala or Spark or R. Now, R is a little bit different because R was not originally designed to be very efficient. It has been improved somewhat, but generally speaking, it is less efficient than processing in, say, Spark or in Scala using Python.
So hopefully that has answered the question around memory in the chat window. So thanks for putting that in. So when we are writing Spark, what we need to think about is that if we have existing machine learning code, and you've probably written that in Python, so we need to rewrite that to use Spark. And the reason why we want to do that is because that Spark's RDDs will not scale, okay? And so that means that a little while back, a friend of ours who had a client who wanted to use Spark so that they could improve the performance of their machine learning model. They added more compute nodes to their cluster, and all they got was a hefty bill, right? And they were shocked as to, well, I've added all of these resources, but my performance hasn't improved. And the reason behind that is because while it is relying on pandas, and pandas are normally the go-to that are wanting to be used for those data frames, the problem was that pandas are not part of the Spark ecosystem and do not scale, okay? But what we did get was we got these things called koala data frames. I don't know why my slide deck is jumping to the next slide. That's very interesting. So we actually got this thing called koalas. And for those of you, I didn't mention it in my introduction, Ginger's from the US, but I'm from down here in Australia, and we actually have koala bears. And so when we see, well, for me anyway, when we see technology using names of different animals, koalas being from down here, it gives us something to just think about going, yeah. But the thing with koalas is that they are like pandas, but the data frames allow us to have those on the clusters, and they scale, therefore increasing the performance of our processing.
All right, so what Spark in Microsoft Fabric is designed to do is designed to help you out with the data engineering and data science. So if you're doing either of those, you'll find it more easily because it shows up at the top. But no matter which environment you find yourself in there on the bottom left-hand corner, you can, of course, access Spark inside of Fabric. Now, one of the additions to Spark in Fabric that you didn't see, perhaps, if you used it within Synapse, is adding your lakehouse. So adding your data as part of your native element to your notebook allows you to more easily use all of the different data elements within it by a simple like drag and drop method. And having a notebook is also using for ETL process or transforming your data, extracting it and loading it, then transforming it, is something that people are more using with notebooks now than ever. And the reason why is that notebooks are used for something that's called idempotent data processing, and which is a really fancy word for meaning that it's really easy to write code that way, that if it has to stop in the middle because somebody gave you bad data, that's of course the only reason that processes don't work. It's never your bad code. That you could stop and restart it more easily. And the error logging inside of a notebook is very, very good. So you can see exactly what the issue was with the data that caused it to not process. So Spark is being used not only to, do data science algorithms, but just simple, I want to transform this data using and creating a gold or a curated layer that I'm going to be using for processing perhaps for my backend for Power BI. There are other ways that you can, of course, transform your data, but there are no data limits with Spark, unlike what you'll see with pipelines if you're using workflows inside of pipelines or in Dataflow Gen 2s. Both of those have processing limits for the size of data that you can use. Compute, but there are no limits for how much data you can transform with Spark, because you can always, of course, add more compute clusters to increase your performance, and it will never blow up on you and tell you that you're stuck. You always have a resolution if you're running out of resources.
Okay, so hey, Ginger, did you see the latest question in the chat around issues around data skew and some possible workarounds?
Well, one thing about Spark data frames is everything inside of Fabric is controlled at the workspace level. So inside of the workspace level, you can choose larger compute. You by default get a medium compute cluster inside of your workspace, but using the properties in your workspace, you can increase that to a larger size. So you don't have to do that. But if you want your data frame to have more resources, you can simply add them inside of the workspace. So instead of using the medium cluster, perhaps make a larger cluster, and you can custom configure your workspace within the workspace properties for that cluster to have the properties that you want.
Hopefully that's giving you an option to go and try, but very, very flexible and configurable for you to change for your particular processing and workloads. So when we are loading a notebook, what we do need to be aware of is that there's going to be 4 options that we can see. And one of those is Python or PySpark. Now, if you are familiar with Synapse, and hopefully a few of you have been using Synapse for a little while now before Fabric came along, you would have you'd understand that you needed to create your dedicated pool, load your libraries, and then you were ready to start work. Now, all of that takes time. In Fabric, we don't have to create dedicated pools. We can optionally create a new pool if we want more resources, but out of the box, we can just get started with our work far, far quicker than we could in Synapse. Now, the Azure SDK for Python is a set of libraries which allows you to work on Azure for your management, runtime, or data needs. Now, the Microsoft Azure Synapse client library uses the Microsoft Azure SDK for Python, and this has been tested on libraries up to version 3.8. The SDK provides us the management functionalities which you want to access in code rather than the UI.
I got a couple of questions regarding clustering, and I did want to address that. Anytime you're using anything inside of Fabric, you are dependent upon the overall tenant resources that you have. So while you can, of course, increase your and change your pool from, one pool to another and increase the number of nodes as well, at some point you may need additional tenant resources. I worked at a company that went from F64 to F128 because they realized that their compute demands were greater than that of an F64. So if you are running into issues of scaling, it could be a tenant resource, which you will run up against if you run out of resources in your Spark cluster. And regarding, which language works best, Python or Scala, if you are right, there is no performance benefit from one or the other. I find that I believe it's easier to write it in Python because there's a lot better examples of how to make that perform well. So I always use Python. So there may be some tricks that I don't know with Scala, but I can tell you that I don't know of any significant performance reason to use Scala, so I don't, and I just use Python. Now, one thing about Spark SQL to think about, because I know there's also a misconception that, oh, I need to write everything in Python. I can't go to Spark SQL, otherwise it's going to be slow. PySpark's so much faster. No, it's not written that way. The underlying engine uses the same components. So no matter which one you use, you're going to use the same underlying engine. So Spark SQL is a native part of Spark as well. It's as much of a language as, say, PySpark. And what you need to use is the magic command, which is %% and then it will allow you to write SQL statements using the data frames that you have loaded up into Spark. Now, one thing to remember, if you are using Spark SQL, it uses ANSI SQL, which is different than T-SQL. Now, T-SQL is something that Microsoft has added as part of, that was added at Ignite, and you can certainly use T-SQL inside of your notebooks as well. But the difference with using T-SQL inside of a notebook is you're not using PySpark, you were using T-SQL. So you can use it for something like doing a stored procedure, but that's not going to help you load data inside of Python. So that needs ANSI SQL. And for help to write better ANSI SQL, you can do what I do and use Copilot. I always take my T-SQL code and put it into Copilot and tell it to rewrite it in PySpark. And then if there's any weirdness, like one of the ones that I run into is date add has an underscore and just things like that I tend to forget the syntax on. So I just have Copilot change that syntax for me.
And talking about using SQL in Spark, what we've got a couple of different methods to be able to write our code to pull that data out so that we can actually use it. Okay, and so the first one that we can see at the top here is where we're using PySpark and we're creating our data frames. Okay, and we can see in this example that we've got here on the screen, we've got our bikes data frame, and it's going and running a Spark SQL statement. And you can see that, it looks pretty similar to what you'd be used to. Okay, we're going and selecting a couple of products from the products table. We've got a where condition, and then we're saying display our bikes data frame. The other one, like Ginger just mentioned on the previous slide, with our magic commands, with our %% SQL, I think we need to update this one, but what that's doing is telling the code cell that we're working in that we are going to write SQL code. And so you can see here that we've just written this purely as a SQL statement, like we would in our favorite tool that we use to connect to our data environment, and the way we go. Now, what I like to think about this is that with the first one, it's a bit like in Management Studio, or Azure Data Studio or VS Code. If we're connecting to our SQL environment, we can create SQL code using dynamic SQL, where we're bundling it all up and we're able to execute it. So little variations for us to be able to achieve the same outcome.
One thing that you also might want to look at inside of when you're developing, if you're using Spark, you might want to use VS Code. You can you may have like that tool better and want to use it to set your to make that your your user interface of choice. I know that some people never use the Spark interface to write and connect to lake houses and warehouses. They write all that inside of Management Studio because they're used to using it. And in the same way, you can use VS Code as the tool that you use to write code, and in that instance, just configure it to do that. Now, there is a bit of setup that is involved to make that happen. You do need to install the Java Development Toolkit from the Open JDK website, and you want to make sure that you install that JDK link, not the JRE. You need to install Conda from Miniconda. You may or may not have to give them your email. I've done it twice. One time you did, one time I didn't. And then you'll need to install the Jupyter extension for VS Code and, of course, the Synapse extension. So that's the kind of things you need to do to prepare to be able to use VS Code as your environment for Fabric, because once you have it configured, you can use it instead.
So taking that a little bit further, one of the other things that we need to have in place so that we can finish that configuration and use that, we need to add the Java home to your environment's variable. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is just here to give you an example as to what that looks like. We'll quickly go through the next couple of slides showing you, what is required, and you can easily come back and see these, but Ginger will take us through a demo on having this all set up.
So what you're going to need to do is make sure that you also have the path modified, and make sure you modify the correct path too, by going to Control Panel, the Edit the System Processing, and including the Java Home bin inside of path. It does is terms of with different versions of JDK. It will use the latest version. It doesn't really matter which one. It just you need to have it. I don't know, there's no reasons you can't use the latest version to answer to Jeff's question there. It's just that Microsoft, when they wrote their documentation, they said everything after 7 will work. So it's basically a lower limit, not an upper limit. So as long as you have it installed, that's what it needs to run, because it is dependent upon that inside of the environment. And yes, they are planning on supporting future versions, because again, they want this tool to continue to work going forward. So whatever the latest version is, they're working to make sure that inside of VS Code, that won't be an issue. As you know, VS Code is something that developers use to develop Java too.
Okay. So once we've got all of that configuration set up, one of the things that we do need to do is we then go and install the Synapse extension. Now, if you're not very familiar with VS Code, this is a very simple process to go and do. Extensions make our working environment very lightweight. We get to pick and choose what we want to put in place. Now, if you are in a environment that, from a security point of view, is locked down, the upshot about extensions is that you can download the extension and provide that to your security team, where they're able to have a look at that, approve it, put it into a location that you've then got access to, and you can install the extension, allowing you to then start on your process.
So thinking about real quick question about KQL. KQL is not part of Spark, so KQL is not Spark supported. Spark supports ANSI SQL and not KQL. So no, it's not directly supported. So that's going to be an issue if you wanted to incorporate that with Spark. All right, so the last thing you need to do is you need to make sure that you've got that local working directory set up on your machine, using and set that, and you set that inside of Synapse to your Fabric environment. Really great for Microsoft to call it Fabric just in time for Fabric to come out, but it is called Synapse. And once you sign in and select the workspace, then you can go ahead and access that information directly from VS Code.
Okay, so demo time on in this upcoming demo that Ginger's going to take us through. We're going to step through setting things up, configuring it, just like we've quickly shown you. But we just, as we mentioned earlier, we wanted to make sure that we had those specific requirements captured on slides to then be able to come back and look at this down the track and make sure that your environment is configured.
All right, hey, can you switch that back to Warwick's screen for us there? And notice it flipped over to mine. Yes, great. All right. So as you can only do this once, I had to record this because I can't continue to install over in my environment. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I am going to add the Synapse VS Code extension. Relatively simple to do inside of VS Code. Just go through and take a look at it and then go ahead and install it. So going ahead and doing that. So the next thing that I am going to do here is I am going to install one of the other elements that I need for Fabric environment on VS Code. So I'm going to go ahead and enter what I need to do to make sure to get to that environment. And this is going to be allowing me to install my latest release of Java, which I didn't have loaded, unlike the person who had a whole bunch of them. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and make that happen and install that into my environment. Going ahead and making sure that I have the right version here. And once I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and run that so that I can get my JRE installed. So I did speed through this too because I didn't want to bore you with all the different information here for that. So this is just the JRE. You can just find this for any time that you're looking up JRE to get that to load. Then I'm adding my Jupyter notebook inside of Microsoft. So going ahead and adding that. And then I'm going to add Miniconda. So installing Miniconda into my environment and going ahead and doing that. Because it does use Miniconda and I need to have that installed locally in order for this environment to work. So go ahead and make that happen. and run it as administrator to, once I've got it downloaded, to add the different components to my environment. You know, Warwick, got a good question in chat. We probably should share the links for this somewhere. Maybe we can give them to be added as part of the upload to this. Can you use a pip install instead of downloading and installing a JDK? No, and it's not the it's the JR, because you need to have the JRE for the environment, and this is all got to be done locally. So that's what the documentation says you have to do. Good question, Jeff.
I wonder if, because I haven't even thought about that, but I wonder, I wonder if part of this install and setup and everything that it's included as part of Chocolatey. That'd be interesting to.
Yeah, that's a
just
good question. I don't know.
Have a look at, because same thing, it would just make it a whole lot easier
Yeah.
on a initial setup and everything. I hadn't even thought of that until just now with being asked. So thank you, Jeffrey, for giving us a different thought track to potentially look at, and we can hopefully be able to come back with an answer down the track.
I will say that I do find all this exceedingly tedious as well, the fact that you have to do this. But another thing too, I know that a number of you don't have access to this level of modification if you're using a work machine. So you may have to provide this information to an administrator so that they install these components for you so that you are able to code using VS Code. So once I've got all of that installed and my path modified, then I can just go to my Synapse workspace folder here. And then I got to create. So I got my last step is I got to go in and I've got to create a local folder for all of this to be copied to. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder Fabric, because I'm real unique that way, and add that as my work folder. And this is going to be my work folder inside of VS Code. So VS Code is going to use that, and then it's going to have me log in and says, yep, you are logged in now. So once I have logged in, now I am good to go. So I've got all of the different components that I need to be able, and I'm logged in. Now you'll notice on the side there, you'll see that Synapse icon there below the Git icon. And that Synapse icon there on the bottom shows how you can access it. So just kind of looking through the different components, seeing how everything is loaded, so that you can see, what, and seeing what your local path is, and just kind of reviewing the different steps that we need, making sure that we are logged in. And then going to my Synapse icon, selecting my workspaces. These are all of the ones that I'm currently connected to. Notice here I connected to my workspace, and now we can see all of my different notebooks that I have created inside of that Fabric workspace. So I can go ahead and then open up any of them and then work on them inside of my environment here, inside of the VS Code, rather than doing that inside of the UI. So just select it, and then and then make sure that I've got that opened up, which gotta click on the right icon here to do it. I don't know what happened to my video there. And I need to download it first, and then once it's downloaded, then I can go ahead and open it, because I am opening up a local copy. So once I've got it downloaded, then I can see the code here, and we can see everything that's loaded inside of that notebook. And from this point on, I can go ahead and run this locally rather than using the UI inside of Fabric. That's definitely an option that you may wish to explore. All right, over to you, Warwick.
Okay, so all right. So from a Copilot side of things, Power BI licensing is changing, but for you to be able to get the majority of the potential options that you want to use, plus resourcing, etc., you don't need an F64 license. You can get away with lower licenses, but the to access your Power BI service, you do have to have a workspace which is running either an F64 or premium capacity license. Now, where I said that the licensing is changing, as it stands right now, you still can work with those premium capacity licenses. However, be aware that PSKU licenses are going to be going away, and you will be going to FSKU licenses only. To use Copilot in Power BI Desktop, you do need to be an admin, a member of the contributor, be a member or contributor to access that, and have at least one workspace that's assigned an F64 capacity or higher. Make sure that Copilot has been enabled. Now that's enabled at the tenant level, so you may not have that right to do that. You may need to ask an administrator to be able to do that. Plus, also, you'll need to be added to the whitelisted section by your Fabric administrator. Okay, so there's a couple of little things that we do have to have somebody else do that for us, or in our case, for Ginger and I, we're both able to take care of that in our own environments. Excuse me.
You know, one thing that is really cool, Microsoft has changed some of the feature functionality. For example, they've added some elements of Copilot to the Power BI desktop at Ignite. That does require additional licensing, but there is still something that you can do that you do not need to have an F64 license for. You just need Fabric capacity, and that is Data Wrangler. Unfortunately, the Power BI license, Jeffrey, to answer to your question, premium per user does not offer the ability to use any Fabric elements. So no Copilot, no anything else. Strictly for Power BI. So nothing other than Power BI works with that license. Great question. So for Data Wrangler, this is something you need with a Fabric capacity, but you can have as little as an F2 to make that work. And this is called Data Wrangler. And Data Wrangler is designed to help you learn how to write Python. And it helps to modify data frame content. So different kinds of cleaning options that you can do with that. And it writes Sparks using the items specified in Data Wrangler.
And so, like Ginger mentioned, it helps you create that code, right? So some of you are probably far better at writing Python code than I am, but Data Wrangler makes my life a whole lot easier in being able to look at our data and go, well, how do I need to incorporate that into our notebook to be able to access it, right? So what does it actually give us? It makes it easier for us to be able to view and analyze our data. It takes the what we're looking at and translates that into Python, that we're able to add that to our notebook to use continually down the track. And as Ginger mentioned, we do not need the F64 SKU. So with that, let's dive in and have a look at Data Wrangler and how we're able to use that. So what I've got here, hopefully you are familiar with this, but I've just logged into app.microsoft.com. Okay, and so this is just our homepage that gives us all of our links off to the various personas and everything that we might want to work in. Now we're going to go to our data engineering environment. Now, I already have a workspace in play. So what I'm going to do is I want to create a new notebook. And so we come down here and we select our new notebook. For the purpose of the demo, I'm not going to rename our notebook, but the first thing that we need to do is we need to add a lakehouse so that we've got access to our data that we're wanting to utilize. So I'm just going to add my lakehouse to that, and here's my lakehouse that we already had in place. Excuse me. So the first thing that we want to be able to do is we need to be able to, we write our, there we go. We're going to write our statement that we're wanting to use to pull our data from our data frame or from our data lake, right? So we're going to just go Spark. Okay, nice and simple. And we're just going to pull the first 1,000 rows of data from our data set. Now, this shouldn't take too long for that to come back, okay? If you're not familiar with notebooks, it gives us the ability to have code cells. We can have different comments. We can create graphs. We can do a lot of things inside of the notebooks. And the beauty of it is that we're able to save those, reuse them down the track for whatever processes we're wanting to use on a repeatable fashion. Now we can see that we've got our first 1,000 rows, but hey, look at this. We've got 4 columns here, and our column headers are not fantastic at all. Underscore C 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now, this may come about because the data that we've grabbed and we've imported, it may not have had headers. It may not have, we may not have pulled that information incorrectly. It might not be clean, right? So all of those types of things that we're used to seeing as data professionals, because we're getting data from all different locations. Now, the beauty of Data Wrangler is that we can now take this data set and we can quickly and easily make modifications, and Data Wrangler can generate that code that we need to do. So to access Data Wrangler, there's a couple of ways of doing it. The first one that we're going to have a look at is up the top here in the menu. We're just going to come to Data Wrangler, and we'll open that up, and we're going to choose our data frame that we're wanting to apply this to. Okay, opens up a new screen, shows us the details that we've got. So here's our data, and like we saw in the result set, we've got our columns and we've got the data. Quickly and easily, the first thing we want to do is go and change those column headings. So we can just come down here to our schema environment, and we can see that we've got a number of different options available to us. We're going to choose the rename, and we choose our column. So we can see here's our first column. Now, as we can see over here to the right in our data, we want to give it a something that's a bit more reasonable. So we're going to call it country. I'm going to apply that. Now, what you will see down here, we've got these things called cleaning steps. Now, that means that we're easily able to make a change, and it's telling us, okay, what was that change? Well, we renamed the first column. So therefore, we're able to easily go back and forth if we make a mistake while we're working on this. So I'm just going to quickly go and rename the other 3 columns for us. So this is our country code. Our year, and then our final one being our capacity. So we've made all of those changes, and like I said, if I didn't want to do that, I can click on our rename column 3. We can see that it's crossed out number 6, and we can see that, oh no, we've actually gone back to C3. I could delete that, etc. But reapply it. Now, this is where Data Wrangler, it's not like it's not Copilot, but it acts just like Copilot in that we've quickly and easily changed those names, and I can come up here and say add code to notebook, and it's generated the code that we would need to normally write without even knowing what we need to write. And go add. This brings us back to our notebook. If I scroll down, we can see that it's now added that code to a cell, and all I've done is I've clicked a couple of buttons and I've typed some column names. That's it. So we're going to kick that off, and what this is going and doing is that it'll return our data frame with our data, but it's also renamed that so that we actually see our data. This is more legible, makes it easiest for us to understand what we're working with. Now, given the data that we have got here, right, we can see our capacity, it's in a numeric, but hey, look at this. It's actually currently in a character-based format. Well, we probably don't want it in character format. Once again, we can go back to Data Wrangler. Now, first time around, I said that we could go up here and use the Data Wrangler up in the top, but in our data frame result set, if we come over here to this little table with what, I don't know if it's a broom or a paintbrush, but it's same thing. We can go into our Data Wrangler. What I want to do here is we've got the ability, so we can just come up here to our column, so our capacity column, which is what we're wanting to change, and change its data type. So by clicking up in here, we can see change column type. We've got a number of different data types that we can quickly and easily choose from. I'm just going to choose float 2, apply, and then we're going to add that code to our notebook, go add. I'll scroll down, and we can see this is going and changing our capacity column, and we're changing it to a float data type. Execute that, we'll let that run, and look at that, it's changed very, very quickly, and we can see it's now in a decimal float data type. So with that, let's come back and continue with today's session.
All right, I do want to kind of run through Copilot. I know we're running close on time, but I wanted to talk about Copilot in Fabric. You need to have an F64 SKU to be able to use it. The pricing is getting complicated because there are some more things planned, so you might want to check back after January 1st to see any modifications that have been made to it. If you do have the trial version, unfortunately, this is something that you cannot do with the trial. You do have to have the F64 SKU in order to make that happen. So it is part of an F64 or greater, but this can change.
So one of the beauties of Copilot that comes into the mix in Fabric is that it quickly and easily enables you to be able to sort of create charts, write code, and document your existing code. Now, if you're anything like me, creating charts, I can do it. They're not the prettiest, but Copilot definitely makes that a whole lot easier for us.
All right, one of the things why don't we skip over this, Warwick, and go straight to the demo? And if you could show my screen, we could get that going. All right, so one of the things that I'll let you know is that you know that you can use Copilot. All you need to do is select this icon. It'll bring up a window that you can press a green button on. And what that's going to do is run a bunch of different jobs and then create your Copilot environment. You know that it's done because once it's done, you have these chat magic commands that you can use, and it'll tell you all about it, how you can use it. It gives you an example of the main commands, the magic commands you can use, including chat, code, describe, adding comments, all that good stuff. So I have some data frames that I created here just so that I have something to play with, and I want it to do something with that. So what I asked it to do inside of my Copilot pane is I asked it to draw me a chart, and it created this code for me using pandas to do that, because for a simple chart, that's fine, and created something called sales amount over time. Now, this is a great example of something that Copilot creates that's, well, it's not great, but hey, it does create it. And then I asked it for me to describe my data frame by using that single magic command. And if I say that, it tells me that it contains sales order information and tells me top 10 interesting columns. Well, that's not that exciting. So I'm going to have it write some code for me. So I'm going to use the magic command code and say, create a new data frame joining the sales and products data frames. So what I did there is it simply created this sales merge on product key but inner, but it didn't do it right. So even though you use Copilot, there's just no guarantee that every single time the code that it generates for you is indeed correct. It can be wrong 10% of the time. So do check everything that it creates. So want to go ahead and wrap this up. Warwick, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Ginger. Yep, we're back on here. So what have we covered off today? We've covered off a lot of information, right? So we gave you an introduction to Apache Spark. We had a look at, well, what is Apache Spark inside of Fabric? What are our licensing requirements? We mentioned that it is changing and that we do need to come back and look at this in the new year to make sure that what has been put in place still meets or what you've got, especially around those P SKUs to F SKUs, plus also from a Copilot inside of Fabric for your use. We had a demo on how do we go and set up our environment. We had another demo on data wrangling. We just finished a very quick demo on using Copilot in Fabric to make your life easier on being able to pull out that code or generate that code for you. So with that, our contact information, I'm Warwick Grad, my co-host Ginger.
Thank you very much for attending today. I know that we were a little bit over. We really appreciate your time today. And so to hear us talk about Fabric and Copilot.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Warwick and Ginger. Thank you both. Actually, you covered most of the questions. Actually, all of the questions in the chat, and thank you for being active. But there are some here still that I wanted to show. Let me just bring some of them up. For those guys who are not in the StreamYard, there were some, conversation regarding KQL database that Ginger answered in the chat. But I'm going to just show it quickly about using, a notebook and working with KQL databases. That was actually answered by Ginger. You can add them as a source and then you can use them within Spark notebook. And a question from Vignesh is does Copilot can automatically resolve the error in production?
Yeah, I answered that in chat. It's you.
Awesome. Yeah, I
yeah.
see. Yeah, Copilot can fix errors. Yeah, thank you for being super active. Cool. And some amazing session from Abhishek. Thank you. Great presentation from Shamim. Thank you for joining. And Vignesh and from LinkedIn, thank you for Warwick and Ginger's highly informative speaks on using Apache Spark developed with the Copilot for Microsoft Fabric. I can honestly say that the interactive presentation of configuring Azure Synapse on Visual Studio Code was one of the most instructive. Yeah, Awesome. That was awesome. So, Meredith, when we can have cafe session dedicated to DP700. So for this one, just stay tuned. We will prepare something for 2025 for sure. Stay tuned for those guys. So I don't have any more question in the chat. But maybe one question from my side for you, Warwick and Ginger. So you mentioned about Visual Studio, possibility to just install it, and you have to install all of those guys to be able to work with the notebooks in your local machine, right?
Correct.
And maybe you have to just keep all of those add-ins and extensions up to date. You should just be cautious about all of the updates, and all the stuffs are working together. Do you recommend that to have Visual Studio for coding, or what is the main difference? Is it only the preference from the developers who wants to actually work on browser, on the notebook, in Fabric itself, or in the Visual Studio? Because of course, for both of them, we can have the source code controlling and those kind of stuff. So what is the reason that most of the people are interested in Visual Studio, or some of them are in Fabric? What is the main difference?
So the reason that I get from people is like, I do everything in VS Code. Why wouldn't I want to do this in VS Code as well? And I hear that from people who use a lot of SQL Server Management Studio. Why do I have to do something different in Fabric? I know this tool best. I'd like to use it. So it provides it provides that ability for those people who are very comfortable and really like the environments that they use the most, be that Management Studio or VS Code.
Nice.
Yeah, and because the upshot with VS Code, right? So as we mentioned in the session, it's very lightweight. You get to pick and choose with those extensions. You've got that. You mentioned source control. Okay, so you've got that built in that you're able to utilize source control. While we didn't show that in the demo, we were showing connecting straight to your tenant, your environment, downloading. Here's your workbook so that you can work locally, right? I guess it's, how do you go about working appropriately, and what do you feel comfortable using?
I got it. Thank you very much for answering. And there's a question from Vigneshwar. Can we use VS Code web version instead of local?
I don't believe right now that is supported. I know it's in the pipeline. I don't think it's there yet.
Cool. Awesome. So today's session with Ginger and Warwick, it's completed. That was fantastic. I really appreciate your attention, Ginger and Warwick, to the comments in the chat. You answered all of them. I was just in the backstage and enjoying the session. So well, for next week in December, we have the sessions. Just stay tuned for them, and they're there for registration, and you can just wrap up your 2024 with Fabric. And for those who missed this session or attended actually late, the session will be available on our YouTube channel immediately. You can rewatch it, and you can just reach out to Warwick or Ginger for asking questions, maybe and on LinkedIn. And they have already shared their contact information. Thank you very much, and just stay tuned on our LinkedIn page for the upcoming updates. And don't forget to join the learning rooms. There we can chat more about. Cool. With that said, Warwick, Ginger, if you want to add anything, feel free. If not, we can just wrap it up.
Thank you very much for having us. And this is a really great session. I really enjoyed the interactivity.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one. Cheers.
Bye.